I forgive George for beating me, senseless, for trying to sleep because I had to go to work or my son's field trip the next day, for ruining my deceased family's heirlooms, traditions, and keepsakes, my son's furniture, destroying the television we watched together, for wrecking our townhome by breaking windows, punching holes in the walls and doors, ramming his entire body into glass doors, kicking in my front and back door over and over and over, for breaking or removing the locks from all of the doors and sometimes the knobs altogether, so I had nowhere to feel safe, including the sacred space of my son's room where he beat me bloody on his bed. For terrorizing and threatening my blind and deaf dogs by leaving the gate open I built to keep them safe, telling me he hoped I'd find their bloated dead body in the pond or scrape their remains off of the pavement, for kicking them off of the bed and throwing across the room because they were trying to protect me, for threatening to make me unrecognizable to my son by breaking all of the bones in my face.
I forgive myself for falling in love with a monster. These were not the words of a character in a television drama. This was the opening statement from Sarah Boone herself during her sentencing hearing. Imagine the shift in the courtroom at that moment. Just a short time later, the gavel fell, confirming her fate: life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Defense, court pronounces sentence as follows. Ms. Boone, court sentences you to life in the Department of Corrections, with credit time served that Madam Clerk will provide to you momentarily.
How does a final plea, a moment designed to garner a sliver of sympathy or judicial leniency, become the very act that seals one's own doom? Stick with us. Our legal experts are about to pull back the curtain and reveal precisely how a speech meant to save her instead became the final exhibit of her guilt.
Welcome to True Crime Tapes, where we bring you the most gripping, mysterious, and heart-stopping stories from the world of true crime. If you're fascinated by the unknown and want to uncover the secrets that the world tries to hide, you're in the right place. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a chilling story. And for those of you already part of our community, welcome back. We're glad to have you with us. Drop a comment below to share your thoughts and theories, because we love hearing from you. True Crime Tapes. The truth is always stranger than fiction.
There are certain criminal cases that become permanently seared into the public consciousness, not just for the crime itself, but for the sheer audacity of the defendant. The case of Sarah Boone is one of those. She's the Florida woman who, in an act of what prosecutors called cruel punishment, zipped her boyfriend, Jorge Torres Jr., inside a suitcase. What followed was captured on her own phone, a chilling recording of her taunting him as he begged for his life, gasping his last breaths until he ultimately suffocated. It is a horrifying scenario that ended with a guilty verdict and a mandatory life sentence. But before the judge delivered that sentence, Boone had one last, desperate opportunity to seek mercy. She took 20 minutes on the stand. In that time, she did not express simple remorse. Instead, she called herself a survivor, cast blame on nearly everyone involved in her life and trial, and then, as the judge sealed her fate, she stared forward, her face an emotionless mask. Today, we are going to unpack that extraordinary final plea, every word, every calculated tactic, with the insights of two veteran attorneys who have witnessed this exact brand of courtroom drama and narcissism unfold countless times. Let's explore this legal and psychological spectacle. To understand the speech, we must first rewind to a night in October 2020, in a home in Winter Park, Florida. The narrative Boone initially provided to investigators was a tragic accident. She and her boyfriend, Jorge Torres, both heavily intoxicated, were playing what she described as a game of hide-and-seek. She claimed Torres, weighing around 160 pounds, thought it would be funny to climb inside a large blue suitcase. Boone admitted she zipped it shut, but what she left out was the most damning evidence of all, discovered on her own phone. In a series of deeply disturbing videos, she is heard laughing and taunting Torres as he desperately pleaded to be let out, his cries of "I can't breathe" echoing from inside the suitcase. Her response was cold, "That's what you get, and for everything you've done to me." She then went to bed, leaving him trapped inside to die. After a thorough investigation and trial, a jury was presented with all the evidence, including those horrific videos and Boone's own statements that she zipped him in intentionally to scare him. They deliberated for just under 90 minutes before returning a unanimous verdict: guilty of second-degree murder. On December 2, 2024, Judge Cranick faced the task of imposing a mandatory life sentence, as second-degree murder is a first-degree felony in Florida that can carry a life term. With the verdict decided and the sentence largely set by law, only one question hung in the air. Would Sarah Boone use her final moments in court to show a glimmer of remorse, or would she double down on a narrative of her own making? When her moment arrived, Sarah Boone stood before the court. She didn't begin with an apology to the family of Jorge Torres or an expression of regret for her actions. Her first official act on the stand was to grant absolution to herself. Defense attorney Alicia Morales notes, "Judges are accustomed to hearing defendants say, 'I forgive me.' In this context, it is almost never perceived as genuine contrition. It consistently comes across as a form of gaslighting." Prosecutor-turned-analyst Dan Markel adds, "First impressions in a courtroom are absolutely critical. A judge often forms a fixed opinion within the first 30 seconds. By opening with self-forgiveness, she essentially confessed to a complete lack of accountability from the very start. The energy in the courtroom transformed almost immediately, shifting from any remote possibility of mercy to a heavy, skeptical silence. It was a strategic miscalculation of enormous proportions, establishing a defiant tone for the entire 20-minute address. Boone's next major theme was a defiant declaration, "I am not a murderer, I am a survivor." She then launched into a detailed account of alleged repeated beatings and abuse at the hands of Torres, attempting to frame the Suitcase incident as a drunken, mutual game that tragically and accidentally went wrong. She even declared, "I forgive Jorge for beating me senseless," before listing a long series of alleged abuses. The glaring problem with this narrative was the mountain of evidence the jury had just reviewed. Detectives had testified that she admitted to zipping him in the suitcase with the intent to scare him. And the jurors, who had sat just feet from her, vividly remembered the chilling video clips where she was heard taunting him while he suffocated. Morales elaborates, "Domestic violence is a profoundly serious and tragic issue, and its victims deserve every available protection. But in this case, the defense of abuse was primarily raised after her arrest, rather than being a central, well-supported argument during the trial itself. The jury was not presented with sufficient corroborating evidence for these claims." Markel chimes in, "When you reject a 15-year plea deal and gamble on a full trial, you cannot simply reboot with an entirely new, unproven theory at the sentencing phase. The time for that strategy was before or during the trial, not after the guilty verdict has been read." Her own testimony had already undermined her claims, as she admitted to intentional acts like hitting the suitcase with a bat, while denying she ever intended for Torres to die. This chasm between her survivor narrative and the established evidence was simply too wide for the court to cross. Having failed to reframe the facts, Boone pivoted to a new target, the system itself. She looked directly at the judge and delivered a stunning accusation, "Your ignorant mind was already made up." But she was far from finished. Her 20-minute speech, and a subsequent 28-page handwritten letter she sent to Judge Kranick, evolved into a comprehensive assault on every person and institution involved in her case. She railed against her own attorneys, the prosecution, the media, and even court clerks, accusing the judge of bias and judicial errors, and labeling the court as corrupt. Markel can only shake his head at this tactic. Consider the logic. You are standing before the very court you are asking for a downward departure, a legally permissible, though statistically improbable, act of judicial discretion, and you are actively insulting the one person with the power to grant it? Morales adds with a laugh, "It's like asking a chef to prepare a gourmet gluten-free meal while simultaneously telling him his flour tastes like sawdust and his cooking is incompetent. Spoiler alert, you're probably getting the gluten and it might even be extra crunchy." Her actions, rather than creating any space for leniency, only served to harden the court's resolve. Perhaps the most audacious moment of her statement came when Boone declared she forgave Torres and his family, though for what, she never fully clarified. Then, in a bizarre extension of this magnanimity, she offered her forgiveness to the state attorney as well. Morales immediately identifies this as a classic textbook example of Darvo: deny, attack, and reverse victim and offender. She is attempting to position herself as the morally superior figure in the room, hoping that public opinion, or perhaps an appellate court, will somehow be convinced to question the verdict, Morales explains. Markel notes that appellate courts almost never consider emotional letters or performative courtroom speeches when reviewing a case. But if they did, he says, this type of self-serving rhetoric, this "I forgive you for being wrong about me" posture would be pure kryptonite. It doesn't demonstrate a legal error occurred, it demonstrates a profound misunderstanding of the legal process and a complete refusal to accept accountability. It's a manipulative tactic designed to shift blame, but in a court of law, it is fundamentally ineffective. When it was finally time for Judge Cranick to deliver the sentence, the atmosphere in the courtroom was thick with anticipation. He recited the Florida statute, confirming the mandatory life sentence for her second-degree murder conviction, with credit for the 4 years, 9 months, and 8 days Boone had already served. As the cameras focused on her, Boone's expression remained eerily flat, a stark, stone-faced mask devoid of any visible emotion. Morales whispered, "That freeze response is one of two things. Either it's genuine, paralyzing shock, or it's the carefully maintained mask of someone who still, in that moment of ultimate defeat, believes they can control the narrative." Markell added a telling detail. Jurors who spoke with reporters after the trial frequently mentioned her lack of tears and her cold demeanor throughout the proceedings. For them, her reaction at the end confirmed they had made the right decision, that their guilty verdict was just. Her apparent lack of emotion only reinforced the public and official perception of her guilt. In the days following her sentencing, Boone wasn't finished. She composed and mailed Judge Cranick a sprawling 28-page handwritten letter, which largely reiterated the same talking points from her speech but with fresh accusations of corruption and judicial errors. In it, she insisted she had not received a fair trial and alleged profound bias from the court. Markell is quick to clarify the harsh reality of the appeals process. Appeals are built on preserved legal errors that occurred during the trial, not on a defendant's feelings of unfairness or personal grievances expressed after a conviction. He emphasizes that this letter, while dramatic, is legally irrelevant to her case. Morales predicts, she will likely file numerous pro se motions, meaning she'll represent herself in these filings. The vast majority of these are dismissed as frivolous because they fail to articulate any genuine legal error. Indeed, Boone has a well-documented history of clashing with her legal counsel, having gone through 8 attorneys before her trial even began, and at least 2 appellate attorneys have already withdrawn from her case post-conviction. The bottom line is stark. In Florida, a life sentence for this crime means life, unless a higher court identifies a reversible error, a procedural or substantive mistake so significant that it fundamentally undermined the fairness of her trial. And crucially, her own post-conviction statements, filled with personal attacks and unproven claims, cannot manufacture such an error. If you are finding this detailed examination of courtroom psychology and legal strategy insightful, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications so you don't miss our next case breakdown. The comments section is already active with thoughts on this case. We invite you to share your perspective after you finish watching. Unsurprisingly, social media platforms erupted with reactions to Boone's sentence. The public discourse largely fractured into 2 opposing camps. One side saw a battered woman who was failed by the justice system, while the other saw a textbook narcissist finally being held accountable for her actions. Markell offers a crucial word of caution on this point. Real survivors of domestic violence deserve our belief, our resources, and our unwavering support. However, conflating every single claim of abuse, especially in the absence of corroborating evidence, ultimately risks diluting the credibility of those who come forward with documented injuries and timely reports. Morales provides a perfect summation: evidence still matters. Period. Sympathy without facts, no matter how well-intentioned, can lead to injustice in either direction. It's a delicate balance that the legal system must constantly strive to maintain. The divided public reaction highlights the emotional complexity of cases like this, but the justice system itself must remain anchored to verifiable facts and evidence. So, what critical legal takeaways can be gleaned from Sarah Boone's extraordinary courtroom performance? While a judge's final decision is rooted in the law, human perception remains a powerful factor. Demonstrating genuine remorse, acknowledging the profound harm caused, and accepting responsibility can influence a judge's view of a defendant's character, potentially opening the door for any leniency allowed within legal bounds. Boone's defiant approach, in contrast, painted her as unrepentant, leaving absolutely no room for judicial empathy. Launching a direct attack on the judge, the prosecutors, or the legal process itself is almost universally counterproductive. Judges are sworn officers of the court, and such attacks are viewed as contempt for the institution, not as valid legal arguments. This tactic alienates the very person who holds your fate in their hands, making any hope of a downward departure from a sentence virtually impossible. The courtroom is a forum where facts, presented through admissible evidence, determine legal guilt or innocence. Introducing new, uncorroborated theories at the last minute, particularly at sentencing, is highly unlikely to persuade a court that has already weighed the trial evidence. New arguments should be reserved for an appeal, and only if they are legally cognizable, meaning they identify actual legal errors that occurred during the trial, not simply a disagreement with the jury's verdict. Sarah Boone's final plea was not a plea at all. It was a defiant 20-minute masterclass in deflection and blame shifting that ultimately cemented her life sentence. She granted herself absolution, launched a scathing attack on the very system that judged her, and by all accounts, still expects a miracle on appeal. But legal experts are unequivocal. The trial record appears clean of the kind of reversible errors that would be necessary for a successful appeal. Her post-conviction arguments are deeply personal grievances rather than legal ones, and in the state of Florida, for the crime of second-degree murder, life means life. So, what part of her truly astonishing performance stunned you the most? Drop your thoughts below in the comments. If you learned something new or found this breakdown insightful, please like the video and share it with anyone else captivated by true crime and the intricate dance of courtroom psychology. Until next time, I'm keeping the legalese human. See you in the next case.